Good evening. I'm so glad that you've all turned up on a Sunday evening for the session. So I'm Parinita Vishweshwar. I'm an architect by profession. I've also been doing design thinking workshops like for the last couple of years for college students as well as school students and also for a group of entrepreneurs. So with that basic introduction, let's just start off the session today. So our topic is method to magic. We'll figure out like why it's called that over the session. Also, I would request if someone else could take over the access, like the host, so then I don't have to keep accepting people, admitting them inside.
Okay, shall I take the host right back?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Done.
Okay, thank you. So we'll just start off.
Yeah, sure.
So there are a couple of rules before we start off with. I would request everybody to be on mute because this will just make the whole flow of the presentation easier. The second one would be if you have any questions at any point of time during the presentation, please feel to write it in the chat box at any point of time. Keep a pen and paper. If time permits, then we can do a quick exercise. And most importantly, please have fun. Okay, we are going to try to make it as interactive as possible. So please have fun. Okay, to start off with, in the chat box, I would request all of you to write a yes or a no if you think you're a designer. I'll just give you 30 seconds, guys. How do I access the chat box?
That is what, no, I have to give the, I think, host right back to you to view that. Or if everyone is posting on a common room, you can see that, I suppose.
On the chat box, I should be able to see, but okay. Okay, so yeah, could you share the access again then if I have to see?
Okay, I'll do that. Done.
Still not able to view the chat box. Okay, we'll go through the presentation and then I'll look at the screen. So, I'm sure you have either replied a yes or a no. We'll see if all of you are designers at the end of it. There are 5 professions mentioned over here: artist, architect, engineer, scientist, as well as a businessman. Okay, so just ask yourself, like, out of these 5 professions, do you think any one of these professions are not designers? Are all of them designers? Oh, I can see the chat box now. Great. So a lot of you said you're not designers. Okay, we'll come to that. Okay, out of these 5 professions, do you think any one of these professions is not a designer? Please type it out. Do you think an artist is a designer? Do you think an architect is a designer? Engineer, scientist, businessman. Do you think either of them are not designers? So I have Rishi saying that none of them are designers. None of them are not. Okay, so you're saying all of them are. So everyone is a designer. All are designers. Okay, great. Let's look at why you think all of them are designers. Okay. So what we know of designers, design is not aesthetics. Okay. It's not about how you make things look. It's not making things look good. It's not only about curating an event. It's not about designing a product, but design is trying to solve a problem with relevance and novelty. And in those 5 cases, I have just taken 5 professions for now. It could be pilot, it could be a lawyer. All of them are actually trying to solve a problem which is relevant as well as novel. Novel means nothing but if it's honest, good, and original. So even yourself. Now, I hope like you're solving problems in a day-to-day life, right? So you are all designers if you're trying to solve a problem with relevance and novelty. So I hope all your no's have become yeses. Now that we have established that all of us are designers, let's look at a more structured way of how we can utilize design to the maximum to come up with something great. Okay, so we are going to use a simple process called design thinking. Okay, so what is design thinking? Design thinking is the idea of using design. Design is going to be a primary thing over here as a way of solving complex problems. Okay, so any problem that could be any social, economical, political, personal, anything, any complex problem, but in a more simplified manner. Okay, so that is what design thinking is all about. Now we'll see why design thinking, what are the key principles of design thinking? What makes design thinking different, right? So the first thing is in design thinking, you have a human-centered approach. So what do you mean by human-centered approach? So where you are actually dealing with humans first, okay? So that's primary. A lot of times when we are dealing with problems, we leave out the human aspect of it and start looking at only data. Over here, we are dealing with humans directly to solve their problem. Next, we encourage collaborative teamwork. We try to get as many people as possible into the system, get all their opinions. So there's a lot of collaborative teamwork that's happening with design thinking process. Third one is learning by doing. Okay, so a lot of doing is happening when you are designing something, you're creating something. It does not stay in your mind, but actually putting it down on paper. Third, we embrace experimentation. We try to get as many possibilities as possible when you're doing the design thinking process. Once you have all the information, maybe the data, whatever you've gathered, we try to figure out patterns and relationships. We start understanding the different patterns and relationships attached to it. And sixth, finally, it is all about visualization and showing. Okay, so that is what the whole process is. This is what design thinking is and how it differentiates from any other problem solving method. Now you'll ask, where can I use design thinking? So design thinking you can use for designing a product, also for a service oriented, to even develop an experience, okay? Even to have a process in place, you can use design thinking, to create a new business model, or to develop a new company culture. Okay, so if you want to revamp an old company culture and develop a new one, you can use design thinking, as well as for UI UX design. So either like, all these 7 processes, and it's beyond more. At any point in time, you can use design thinking. So it's not limited. Okay, so now what does it take to do design thinking? Okay, so design thinking has been structured into 5 methods to make it easier for us to follow. So those 5 methods are empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. So these are the 5 basic steps. So we'll go into the details of each one of them. So empathizes. So when you all heard of someone saying, hey, I empathize with you. Hey, I sympathize with you, right? This is very commonly we use with each other. Over here, we don't use sympathy, but we use empathy. The difference between sympathy and empathy is the sympathy is actually feeling sorry for someone. Okay, here we are not trying to feel sorry for someone when you are trying to solve the problem. What you're going to do is be a neutral party and put yourself in their shoes. You put your biases outside and put yourself in their shoes and understand what they're feeling. That's what empathize is. Next, once you empathize with them, it's easy for you to actually identify that the problems that they are facing. And here we define the problem statement. There might be 100 problems, but you're actually narrowing it down. So you start defining a problem. Fine. Then third one is the most fun part, where we are actually, once you have the problem defined, then you start creating like multiple ideas. You start brainstorming. This is where all the ideas come into play. Fourth is the most important, is actually building a prototype. Prototype is nothing but like a model that you're creating. Okay, so you always have to, your idea always has to go through a prototype stage. And finally, how do you know your prototype works? Only once you test it. How do you know your idea works? Only once you test it with the final audience or somebody who you're trying to solve the problem for. And then we do the process again. Now, the design thinking journey, there are 4 questions you can ask along the way. Okay, so there are 4 questions. Something is like called what is, what if, what wows, and what works. So it's the 5 steps of empathy: define, ideate, prototype, and test. You can divide it into 4 questions. So what is phase is basically figuring out what is already happening in the market. What are the different things people are already doing? Here you have to note down what's already in place. Okay. The second stage is what if anything could be possible. Think completely out of the box and do not limit your limit your imagination. What if anything could be possible of? This is where you're going to put all that down. Third is, after you have all the ideas, what do you like? You have to finally filter out some great ideas, right? How do you know it's a great idea? That's called what wows. Okay, we'll come to that later and see how do you identify what wows. Okay, and fourth is very important, what works. It could be a great idea, you will be really fascinated by it, but we need to see if it really works. So there are certain tools to help you answer these questions better, which we will not be going through it in this particular session, but there are certain tools. Okay, it's called journey mapping. There's something called mind mapping, which will help you answer the question of what is actually happening. Then you have brainstorming and concept development to identify what if. And for what wows, you have assumption testing and rapid prototyping. And finally, for what works, you have customer co-creation and a learning launch. Okay, so these are certain tools to help your design thinking process. And I got this from courtesy Professor Jean Litka. She's a professor at Darden School of Business. So she has laid this down. Okay, so are you a design thinker? Okay, so you've already established that you're a designer, but how do you differentiate yourself from a designer and a design thinker? Okay, so do you guys see that there are 3 elements over here: heart, hand, and head? I would like you to quickly type it out on the chat box. For being a design thinker, out of these 3 things, heart, hand, and head, what would be the first way? What would you use first? Would you use your heart first? Would you use your hand first? Or would you use your head first? Head. Okay. I see a lot of heads. Okay. Head, heart, hand. That's the order. Okay. Great. Heart. Did someone put heart? No hearts. Okay. So let's just take a quick example. Okay. So if you and a friend are having a disagreement, if you have an argument and you want to find out what is bothering that person, are you going to go and think about the problem first, or are you going to go ask the person first, or are you going to try to solve the problem before you even know what the problem is? What are you going to do? Yeah. So that's what we make a mistake. It's a very common, all of us actually start thinking with our head first. That's a very common thing. We always think we know what the problem is, but we never even try to find out what the problem is. So in design thinking, since we've already established that it's a human-centered approach, humans always deal with emotions. Okay, you cannot deal with humans by eliminating emotions over here. So heart. Okay, so we will go with heart first, then finally we will do, we show it with our actions, and then think. Okay, the order is just a little different for a design thinker. So first heart, then hand, and then head. Okay, so that's the attitude you need to have. Okay, moving on to the next one. Okay, so that's the attitude. Now there are something called fixed and growth mindset. Let's look at the difference between these two and see which category you fall into place. Okay, so there's something called mindset. If you have a fixed mindset, you fear uncertainty. Okay, you are very comfortable in the known zone. You have to be in your comfort zone. Everything needs to be predictable for you. So when you're in that zone, you avoid new experiences, right? Typically, if you don't like uncertainty, you would avoid new experiences and go with things which are familiar to you. Once you go to things which are familiar to you, you have a narrow repertoire. You're always with the same group of friends. You always go to the same restaurants. You always go to the same places that you're comfortable with. That's called repertoire. Repertoire is nothing but having a different like exposure level. So once you have this, the customer, like, you know, when you have this, you always, okay. So once you have less exposure, you always only rely on the data that you have. Okay, so you have a little certain amount of data. You're just like, okay, I'm just going to study this much data to expand my business. If I have to make some changes to it, I'm only going to use this data that I have, which is already present to me, and I'll make few changes here and there. That's called few incremental data. I will manage my risk. If I have to take some risk, already for a fixed mindset person, the risk appetite is low. And so they manage risk only through analysis of the data that they already have. They take, but as a fixed mindset, you actually take big steps, but you will take it slowly, right? It's obvious because you don't want to rush into things. So typically that's what's going to happen. You will take big steps, but slowly. You will fail more. Okay, so again, here I would like to say that you're not going to fail more in terms of business, but if you're trying to innovate, if you're trying to come up with something new, you're going to fail more only for that, not in your business typically. Okay, only if you're trying to innovate something. Next, let's look at growth mindset. So a person who has a growth mindset will accept uncertainty. He will welcome the fact that he does not know anybody or does not know, because this, he'll start seeking new experiences over here. He'll want to go out there, go into the market, be thrown into the unknown. Okay. He will start talking to new people, visiting new places, building his exposure. That's called, he's expanding his repertoire. Here, the thing is, he's not going to go with the data already given to him, but he'll go that extra mile to get the customer empathy. He might even start observing customer. He might just go nagging them, saying, hey, tell me what's wrong with my product, or tell me your experience, understanding everything, okay? So sometimes what happens is when we say we have a problem with something, but the problem could actually be something else altogether, right? So he tries to detect multiple hidden growth opportunities by just talking to people. When you develop that empathy, people will start sharing things that they will not really share with strange people, like strangers, right? They'll get comfortable with you. So they're managing risk action. It happens through action. They start managing risk through actions. They'll take certain steps based on the feedback they've got. They will implement something and they'll manage risk. They will place small bets fast. They'll say, okay, let's see. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. They'll start making changes quickly. Okay. They succeed more. So if you have a growth mindset, when it comes to innovation, you will succeed more, definitely. Okay, so by now I'm sure you guys have identified whether you have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. Okay, so if suppose someone has a fixed mindset and wants to move towards growth mindset, here are certain things I have noted down that could help you. Find alone time to reflect. It's very important for you to understand yourself first. Reflect what's bothering you. Okay, what's causing your trouble? Why are you thinking that way? Okay, why are you averse to taking risk? You need to reflect. Second, learn something new every day. It could be the smallest of things, but learn something new. Okay, ask more questions. Develop that curiosity. If you have a fixed mindset, ask if it is coming from discomfort with change or fear of making mistakes. Okay, so you need to figure out whether it's a fear or you're just lazy or you don't want to get out of your comfort zone. Then get out of your comfort zone. That's very, very important. Expand your repertoire. Again, repertoire is nothing but expand your horizon, get more exposure. How can you do this? Examine different businesses or industries. Or in your case, since you're all college students, talk to different people, you know, different industries probably right now. Like you might be choosing which companies you want to get placed into. Explore all your options. Seek out, meet different types of people. Don't hang out with the same people who have the same mindset. It's very important to understand what everyone's thinking, right? Can you guys hear me? Yes. Okay. So talk to different entrepreneurs and understand their mindset. Okay, so it's important because I think entrepreneurial mindset is the most dynamic thing that's happening over here. Okay, so talk to different, as many entrepreneurs as you can. Next, take on different roles in an organization. Now that you all be working, I think it's important for you to don't get comfortable in one particular role that you're taking. Okay, so explore different roles. Okay. Now let's look at a case study. Okay, so this is in Denmark. The government, like, you know, there are senior citizens in Denmark, and 125,000 of them rely on government sponsored meal. Okay, something maybe like a ration card system over here, but the government gives them meal over there. So they figured that out of those 125,000 people, 60% of them, like seniors residing in those living facilities, have poor nutrition, and 20% of them were actually malnourished. Okay, so this was a major problem concern for Denmark. So what they did is they hired a design thinking organization called Hatch and Bloom. So the city of Hallsborough, they hired Hatch and Bloom to say like, hey, we know what the problem is. We want you to fix the menu over here. Okay. So what Hatch and Bloom said is like, instead of you telling me what the problem is, I know you've said that you've analyzed it and you said fixing the menu could be the solution. What we want to do is we want to do our own research. We want to figure out what the problem is before. Okay, we want to understand it. Like, let's do our own research. That's what they said. So they got into the step of empathize, where they started talking to people. They started putting themselves in their shoes. And the best way to empathize is obviously observing them in their environment. Another way to do it is also interviewing them. Okay, so I'm sure you all have filled surveys and you've all seen interviews. So I'll just give you a couple of tips to prepare a basic questionnaire if you have to. So whenever you're trying to interview someone, have your questionnaire prepared. Okay, brainstorm earlier, because not everyone's like, you want their time. Okay, they don't need you, you need their time. So be prepared and brainstorm all the questions earlier. Always ask open-ended questions. Do not ask yes or no questions, because we need to get as much information from them as possible. And you know the 5 why rules. I'm sure as kids we've always, like, you know, irritated each other by saying why. Do it now. When you need information, do it now. So once you have all the information ready, you see there's something called, you can gather, like, you know, you can put strategize your data in these 4 aspects. What are they saying, thinking, feeling, and doing? This is how you can separate your data. And this is called a quick empathy map you can do. Okay. So this is what, and who are we empathizing to? Okay. Who are the people we are trying to interview? End users. Those are your B2B customers. Okay. Finally, the team behind the whole thing. And then the customers, B2C. Okay, so it's important to interview everybody in the process. So now that Hatch and Bloom had interviewed, they interviewed the elderly, they interviewed the employees, they interviewed everybody in the organization, and let's see what they found out. Okay, what is their influence? So what is really happening? They figured that the seniors were actually embarrassed to accept government assistance. I think this is a very typical mindset in every country, right? We wouldn't want to be given assistance. So yeah, so they were embarrassed. Next, they felt they were not in control of their food choices. Somebody else was deciding for them. They were not asked for their opinion. Third, they felt lonely while eating alone. I think all of us don't like eating our meals alone, right? So they were feeling lonely that they had to eat alone. And they felt that the menu, like, or their food missed all the seasonal food. Right now it's mango season. Imagine our food without any mangoes, right? So like that, they were not catered to. Those things were not implemented. Fourth, even the workers were bored and they were not motivated. Imagine doing the same job, cooking the same meal day after day. So they were also not motivated. They wanted to do a good job, but since the menu was like so boring, they were not motivated enough. So what happened next? Okay, so this is what they figured. they were like, okay, let's go into the next step. Now that we have identified what's happening, let's see what can be done. So when you're going into the what if phase, okay, there's a tool called co-creation. It's important for you to invite all the stakeholders right now, all the stakeholders into the process, get them on the table who you're trying to solve, and do a workshop with them and come up with different possible problems that are prevailing. Okay, get them into, involve all of them. So right now, the stakeholders over here were the volunteers, okay, who were distributing the food, the experts, the elderlies, obviously, the municipality officials, the kitchen workers, and the employees of the residential care where the elders were staying. So they got all of them together and they were like, hey, let's do multiple workshops with them and let's try to figure out the problem. Okay. So the next step they went into is like defining the problem. This is where 70% of your solution comes. Once you have defined your problem, that's the key. Like you have literally solved the problem, because that's where it all starts. We don't even know what we are trying to solve, right? So you need to define the problem. How can, certain guidelines to help you define the problem? Amplify the good. If you think there's no problem at all, there's always a way of making things better. So amplify it. Eliminate the bad, which is the pretty obvious one. That's what we all try to do. Like, eliminate things. Explore the opposite. Every problem, it's actually good to have problems. It always leads to opportunity. Okay, so convert problem into opportunity. Question the assumptions, whether that is actually a problem or something else is the problem. And then identify the unexpected resources which are there available to you. And the sixth one is break the problem into pieces. Start small. Don't try to solve a bigger problem. So you always have to start big with the macro level and then converge into a micro level. Okay. So that's how a problem statement is defined. So let's see what happened after they had these workshops. They went into defining the problem. So now the problem that they defined is, what if one of the possible solutions was, what if this public service food delivery organization were actually a restaurant? Like, isn't that a great idea? It's like, okay, cool. Let's just see, like, how we can make it actually interesting for them. So what they said, keeping this in mind, keeping this statement in mind, they started coming up with ideas. Okay. So when you're in the ideation phase, it's always best to get as many ideas into the table as possible. Also, brainstorming the worst possible ideas could be the best way to start, because you can get all those ideas out. Okay. So that's why worst possible solutions is also a great way to start. And then you get more creative and constructive. Some of the rules for brainstorming, like since you're going to be working in a diverse group, always respect each other. Okay. Only one conversation should be allowed at a time. I'm sure you all are doing group work together. I'm sure some of you get along with some people and some of you don't, but it's important that you let everyone talk. So only one conversation should be allowed. Focus on quantity. Over here, we're not concentrating on quality. Quantity is most important. Think out of the blue. Okay. Like as if anything could be possible. No judgments to be passed when somebody is giving an idea. Again, visualization is important. Start sketching, start drawing. You don't have to be an artist, but just put down everything on paper in terms of bubble diagram or just words or icons or anything. And then you start building on each other's ideas. Support each other. That's very important. So what they did is they took the question and now they started redefining the kitchen concept. They started thinking, why can't the kitchen actually become a restaurant? Why can't the cooks in the kitchen become a chef? Like they, give them the chef status. Why can't the vehicles or the volunteers going and distributing food actually be the waiters? The description of the food actually become a very attractive menu. Yeah. So this was their idea. After this, once you have the idea, we come into the fourth stage of design thinking, which is prototyping. And like I mentioned, it's one of the most important things that need to be done. So you need to see whether the ideas are feasible, right? So prototype helps you do that. So there are three things that come into the prototyping stage, which is creating obviously your physical or your digital models based on what you're designing for. Getting feedback is also part of prototyping, and also iteration. Okay, doing it again and again. So that's part of prototyping. how now, like I mentioned, like how do we know we are building the right product, or how do we know that it's a wow product? Okay, what wows, right? In prototype phase comes what wows. So there are three aspects to look at. The cost, like we can do it. Obviously, we should be able to do something. We should have the money, that's main, and the customers want it, right? These three aspects we really need to consider. Generally, what we do is we look at whether we can implement it or not, and whether we have the money. If we have these two, we are like, okay, good, the idea is good, let's do it. That's the traditional way of thinking. But once you realize the customers actually want it, you have reached the wow zone. We generally give credit only like 5% or 10% to customers' priority or their interest or their liking, but we need to make that around 70%. That's key. Okay, so that's your wow zone. You've hit the wow zone. So coming back to the case study, let's see what prototypes that they made. Okay, so they thought like, okay, they came up with multiple versions of the menu, like in terms of food, like, you know, mixing it up, getting more items into it, getting the seasonal food into it. Also, which color was more suitable, right? Like we also want something very attractive. So which color attracted the elders? What language is used to describe the food? You can't have something really boring day to day. We always get even our interest, like, you know, when you're looking at a menu card, we're like, hey, that language is really nice. I think they've made it really peppy, right, for us. So it's important how the food is also being described. Like MasterChef, when you see it, they'll be like, okay, pinch of salt, and they just make it sound good. It's the same thing, but how you sell it, right? So language is important. And the fourth is obviously branding and packaging. We always go for something that looks pretty. So they tried all these different prototypes. Okay, so this was what they did. And why do you think making a prototype is actually important? Okay, why are we emphasizing so much on prototype and that being the most important phase in the design thinking process? Because this is where a lot of our assumptions actually get busted. Okay, this is where what we think can happen does not happen. It starts revealing our worldviews. A lot of times we stereotype a lot. Okay, very subconsciously we have certain things that we already believe in. Okay, worldviews also. So it reveals our worldviews. It highlights our actions and inactions, things we actually tend to work towards or not work. Okay, biases. It helps us to explore our biases. Okay, in terms of gender or anything like that. Okay. Awareness. It means we can avoid jumping into a single idea. Okay, you have so many ideas in place, so why jump into one? And finally, the most important thing is we stop blaming others and take responsibility. That's where success lies. So this realization happens when you only build a prototype. So what not to do when you build a prototype? Okay, don't dive into the first good idea that you have. Wait for it, because sometimes it could change. Don't fall in love with any of your prototypes. Okay, because it's not about you, it's about the person who you're testing it towards. Don't explain and pitch it in detail. Let the user experience your model the way it is. Don't follow it. Don't explain too much. Don't prototype without any purpose. Okay, always there has to be a purpose for what you're doing, because first, prototypes are not cheap. Okay, like depends on what you're building, but it's not cheap. Don't feel discouraged if if your prototype failed. Actually, in a way, it's good, right? You know that option is never going to work, so it's all actually taught you something. You've learned something out of it. And then don't see prototypes as a waste of time. Okay, now the final stage is you obviously have to test it. Execution is key over here again. So once you have your prototype ready, test it to the audience that you're catering to, get their reaction, and then see what happens. Okay, if it doesn't work, you go back to the ideation, go back to the prototype, do the test. It keeps going in a loop. So a lot of companies do this like over like years, like, you know, it doesn't work very fast. Finally, what was the result of the whole thing? Like coming back to the case study, now they build a prototype. You know what the result was after they developed this idea? There was actually 500% increase in orders in just 1 week. The way they changed it, just redefining the kitchen concept into a restaurant. So 500%. Okay, forget the sales part of it. The most important win for them was that the seniors, the elders were actually happy. And since they were really happy, then nutrition became better. Okay, they started enjoying the food that we're eating. And also their employees were much more motivated and they took pride in their work. I think if your customers are happy, if your employees are happy and your sales are doing good, I think you have clicked the best business model that could be, right? What else could you want for? So this was Good Health Kitchen. They were successful in doing this, and Hatch and Bloom helped them to come up with something like this. So they started off a problem with like fixing the menu, but was menu the actual issue? No, right? They identified there were so many other things leading to it, and they came up with a solution. Okay, that is just one example that I have given. Now there are a lot of other companies around us, like all the big companies, Airbnb, Apple, Google. Actually, all the big companies, even Nestle, Twitter, all of them have used design thinking in some form or the other. Airbnb to actually maximize the sales in terms of just photographs. Okay, just taking good photographs, they realized how much it sells and appeals to the client. iPod, okay, iPod was like one, like they were relevant, like Apple was relevant in terms of creating like a small iPod, right, which could just fit. Earlier, before that, I think Samsung or Sony, I'm not really sure, but they came up with something bulky, but they were the first ones to come up with something which was like very slim and intricate. And in terms of Google Home is actually one of the products that came out of their design thinking process. So every company uses this process. And also design thinking process was developed in Stanford, okay, in San Francisco, in Stanford University. That's where design thinking process was actually put down on paper. Now you would say, why should I do design thinking over any other method? Because let's look at it. It develops curiosity. Okay, there's so much unknown in this design thinking. It develops your curiosity. Okay, you're going into it blank. You don't need to know anything before jumping into this method. It gives you the flexibility of anything could be possible. It increases your choice because again, we are dealing with quantity over here. It helps get everybody on the table. There are different schools of thoughts, right? That's coming. And obviously prototyping. Even if it's not the solution, it helps you move into the right direction. So so there are obviously design thinking is not the only problem solving methods. There are even analytical methods or like multiple methods that can be used. So when do you use design thinking over another method? Okay, so if you're confused whether your problem requires design thinking, you can ask certain questions which might help. Is the problem human centered? Okay, is the problem that you're trying to solve human centered? Then you can say, okay, if a deep understanding of humans is required, go with design thinking. If few humans are involved, you can go with your analytical methods. How clearly do you understand the problem statement? If there's a lot of ambiguity and you're not clear, a lot of exploration needs to be done, go with design thinking. If it's pretty clear and you know straightforward, this is the solution, go with the analytical. Okay. What is the level of uncertainty? If you have a lot of unknown factors and the past data is unlikely to help you, okay, maybe it's not relevant, okay, so then you use design thinking. And if it's a good predictor, if the data that you have is okay, good, you can use it, go with analytical. What if the data that is already available to you, see if it's actually relevant to your existing data, then you go. If it has no relevance, go with design thinking. If it is clear cut, then you can go with your analytical method. Okay. Finally, I would like to end by saying that design thinking is not about trying to design, don't design to be different, okay, but to make a difference, okay? And don't design for the users, but design with the user. Okay, so with this, I would end the presentation and I'm going to open the floor for questions. Hello?
Yeah, Parinita, can you have an access towards this chat box?
No, sir. One second, I'm going to come out of this and probably stop sharing and then, yeah, now I have, yeah.
Okay, you can see the chat.
Yes. So if anyone has any questions, they could either type it out or just unmute and ask.
Yeah, unmute and participant, you can please unmute and ask if you are not able to access the chat box for any reason. Okay. There is one question.
Okay, this is related to architecture and not design thinking, but yes, factors to be considered. It's one is like location based on what materials that you're using, because local materials, LEED has actually stated a lot of factors that are there in terms of like how much carbon emissions that are there. I think materials is very important that you're using. Like because in terms of transportation that's coming in, how much sunlight, weather you're designing towards with the local climate, using less power. So those are so I can right now state only the basic factors of green buildings because there's so many, like a LEED certified building has.
Okay. Meanwhile, Panita, I have a question. I saw in your website that you have designed a rooftop garden for Madras Management Association. We
Yes.
are associate member of Madras Management Association, and last year we had our convocation program also over there.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah. So one thing that fascinated me was that beautiful rooftop garden. Yeah, because we were thinking about having a lunch over there, and that was one of the uh, prime factors which made me decide that yeah, let's choose that as our venue. So can you share the prototype of that rooftop garden? Um what made you think design in such a beautiful way?
So first, actually, the key thing was we didn't have too much of a budget. So we wanted to go with like the minimal budget was provided to us. And so we were like, okay, that's not actually a problem. That actually gives us an opportunity to how we can minimalize and utilize what's already there. So there were three aspects that was a thing. I think we designed a bar over there, the buffet table. So the buffet table, how it has been designed is we've taken existing desks. They had some desks in their office spaces which they were going to throw out. So instead we were like, okay, let's use it. So that buffet table is actually 3 desks used together, and we stuck it together and we just put tiles over there, tiles and granite. So, and it already had certain partitions inside it. So that was perfect for us to store all the cutlery. So it worked very well with minimal. We didn't have to use any other like wood over there. Like we saved a lot of money with redesigning the whole thing, getting more wood into place. So that was one aspect. They already had like really nice furniture. The bookshelves, the color, we said we'll just spice it up with just giving it a little more color over there. So we just repainted the whole thing. I think sometimes just repainting something can add a lot of, it just adds a lot of color to the space. And I think the third one was like, when you're just coming directly, just this glass feature. Again, that is very, very cost effective. It's just breaking glass pieces and again, just painting it, spray painting it. And it just creates a really nice element of design over there. So it becomes your focus element. All the lights we've used is also like filament lights. So in the night, you can actually start seeing the design. So, and it's used in its rawest form. So not like anything fancy, and obviously use of plants I think really livened up the space, gives it that feel. At the end of it, I think using plants in any space makes it more like livable. And since it's a terrace space, there was actually all these units, AC units, like really, really big AC machines and all that. All the services are placed on the terrace, and we wanted to cover that because this space was going to be used more for like a book reading session, or like you said, having the dinners and the lunches over there. We didn't want someone to look at those services. So all we did was have like plain jute panels and just did block printing. So all the things that we did were very, very cost effective and came into the budget, and together it worked really well in harmony. And so that's one of those features that we do, go with minimalism, like minimalistic design and what's available to us. Try reusing things. Yeah.
Thank you, Pranita. We have a few more questions in the chat box.
Yeah, in the middle of your case study, you cited that quality is not considered. Can you explain me why? Because quality of food is equally important, right? Quality is not considered. Raghunathan, could you expand on that? Like, so the case study, like they did consider food quality. They were not bored of, like, they never said the food was not great for them, like in terms of quality, but they were really bored of the food in the sense, like they kept getting the same food again and again. The quality was good. It's just that there was no variety given to them, no seasonal thing. So even we'll get bored of eating the same food every day. So I don't think once they did the research, right, when they started talking to the elders and the people, they were just bored of the food given to them. Imagine, like, I don't want to mention any food, but imagine if you're having the same rice item every single day, right? They just wanted a difference, and they wanted to have some control over their food choices and not somebody deciding the menu for them on a daily basis. I hope I've answered that. Yeah, quality of food is obviously important, but I do not think that came up as a concern in this particular study while they were talking. I hope I answered that question, Raghunathan. Okay. So how design thinking differs from marketing? So design thinking is a process for you probably come up with your marketing strategy. So design thinking is not marketing is completely different. Marketing is branding yourself. In design thinking, you're not trying to brand yourself. You're coming up with solutions. So even marketing can use design thinking as an approach, right? Design thinking is just a problem solving. Your marketing team can use design thinking as a solution, as a problem solving tool to come up with something solution. Like, you know, maybe they are finding it difficult in terms of branding themselves or even coming up with a logo, right? So that is how design thinking and marketing is different. It's not the same thing at all. I hope I've answered that question, Shilpa. Is design thinking a science or an art? Okay, Karthikeyan, I'm going to ask you the same thing back. What do you think design thinking is a science or an art? Do you think a scientist is a design thinker? Do you think an artist is a design thinker? So I think design thinking is a good mix of science and art over here, because you are using design. That's key. If you think design is only related to art, then yes. So you're using design, but you're trying to solve a particular problem. There's a lot of science, right? Even trying to understand humans, understand human behavior is also a type of science that is there. So I think it's a combination of both, and that's why they use that in all professions. Even scientists use this design thinking approach. Karthikeyan, I hope I answered the question. While studying psychology, enhanced design thinking as a process is human-centered. Yes, definitely. Like if you study psychology, then you've already mastered your empathize phase. You will know exactly how to approach somebody, how to talk to them, right? So I think psychology is very, very important in our design thinking process. Yes, because it's human-centric, you're dealing with people. Yes, it's very important to understand how humans behave. All great questions. Thank you. Like if there are any other questions, I'll be happy to answer. So generally design thinking process, right now we've done it in a very theoretical format, but the best results you could see is actually when you do a small activity with yourselves, and probably like if you want to do a quick activity, you can do it with each other. Like I'm guessing all of your friends over here, you can try it out at your place, like where you call each other today and figure out like what present does the each other person wants. Like we make this common mistake even by just gifting each other gifts, right? We don't ask each other, what do you actually want? We just assume that this is something that they want. Maybe we can just start off with making that small change. And I don't think these days anyone would actually mind like asking, hey, what do you actually want for your birthday? Yeah, instead of giving something which is not relevant to them, it's best to even just start off asking what they want. I think that is one small thing you guys can start implementing from today and see how it works. I'm
Parinita,
sure
I
your
have
friends
one
will be
more
happier.
question. How does this design thinking differs with creative thinking?
Creative thinking is another just like a byproduct of design thinking. It is it's interrelated. It's just that design thinking has a very structured process. Creative thinking does not have that. So it's just the creative, like design thinking, like 5 basic steps of, it's a lot of it is correlated, but design thinking, they just give it those 5 steps of empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. So you can go through those 5 stages.
Great, thanks. I think we are up with the question, and yeah, truly said, design thinking is very important tool of ours nowadays. So much so that now it's being interwoven and getting integrated in many other fields, be it art, science, and in fact, I would say management studies also. And that is the reason we feel the importance of design thinking, that we take our students to National University of Singapore in Singapore for 7 days of design thinking program. So that is where we feel that it's so important to make those crucial decisions in business world also. So
Yes, I
that,
think businesses use it more than anybody else, actually. Designers use it in their day-to-day lives thinking. As an architect, I use it. We take it for granted, the way we think. But businesses use it much more and they see much better results when it comes to this. Yes.
so to we have covered, means you have covered quite a good topics like various approaches, human-centered approach, collaborative teamwork, learning by doing, etc. You have emphasized on where all design thinking can be used and what does it take to do design thinking. You have also covered beautifully design thinking as a journey, what is, what if, what wows, and what works. Also, you touched upon what makes one a design thinker, a beautiful concept of heart, hand, and head. You focused on fixed and growth mindset. You discussed on very interesting case studies and why design thinking. Design thinking is definitely a way towards solving the most complicated problems. Uh, so thank you for that. Parinita is founder and architect of Pinwheel Design Studio, and truly magic can be created with one's creativity, and that is so much eminent that Parinita's creativity I have personally witnessed at MMA, where one can admire nature's effect in rooftop garden. It was truly our pleasure and honor to have you today for such an interesting topic. Looking forward to have you as our distinguished guest and expert speaker at our campus in ITM Chennai too.
Sure.
I'm sure participants would have benefited a lot from such a wonderful session. Thank you again, Parinita, for creating magic with your aura and charm today. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you. And so I think Satyanarayan sir has requested for copies. So I will talk to Ajita ma'am and Gulshan sir, and then probably we can share that as well. It's not a problem.
Sure, sure.
Okay.
Participants can now post their feedback in the chat box. And thank you for joining in today.
Thank you so much for having me and calling me. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinda. Thanks a lot. It was completely our pleasure. We'll catch up soon once this lockdown gets over.
Definitely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.